Good morning, guys. I bet you didn't expect me to do today because in the Western world, people are focusing on Thanksgiving. So I have a love-hate relationship, I think. That's probably not the way to say it either. I have this, growing up, Thanksgiving was my dad cooking, and Papa would make the most amazing cornbread stuffing and gravy and lemon meringue pie from scratch. And there was no Jell-O pudding involved. It was all from scratch. And I learned my love of cooking from my dad. He made the most flavorful, most amazing food ever. And he always said that he learned to cook from his dad. And I never actually witnessed my granddad cook a whole lot. But my dad is an amazing cook. And I always felt that his food came from love. And my grandma on my mom's side also cooked from love. She used to say that it wasn't just the intention, but it was the love that you put in the food. And my grandma wasn't necessarily the best cook. She could do some things pretty good and other things, well, it was food. And I guess for a long time, Thanksgiving for me was about eating, really, and reading a good book, and sometimes watching TV. But then I got older and I had my own children, and I really struggled with what the purpose of Thanksgiving was. I really did. And I had this awful juxtaposition of emotions about Thanksgiving, not as in Thanksgiving is a hard time of year for me, because I'm lucky. I have no holiday trauma. Like, there's a lot of people that the holidays are really hard, especially if they're alone or if they've had bad things happen, family gathering together and there being abusive circumstances or whatever. I was always really lucky. I genuinely do not have any holiday trauma, and I know that there are a lot of people do. My problem with the holiday is that I don't have any connection to it. I have a very deep-seated dislike for the puritanical ideals of colonialism around Thanksgiving, and I've always been really uncomfortable with the expected societal adoption of it. I had the wonderful opportunity to teach and live on a Native American reservation here in Montana for several years, and Thanksgiving was very much celebrated and very much a family get-together. But there was also an undercurrent sometimes of this, depending on the family, depending on who I was with, there was an undercurrent of that we're going to try to make it our own because it doesn't come from us. It doesn't come from our culture. It doesn't come from a place of honor in our history. And I knew that. It wasn't talked about, but maybe once or twice, but it was definitely an uncomfortable thing. And over the years, since then, I've had wonderful get-togethers with friends. When I found out I had celiac and Hashis, it made it even more challenging because there's an expectation starting right around Thanksgiving, Halloween, Samhain. There's a huge cultural shift to food abundance, consumerism. It has taken away from, in my mind, the energy of the Samhain season. And I go back to the Celtic Devotional for this, so I'll read it to you. The winter quarter of Samhain brings the gifts of restoration and renewal. As the cold weather closes in, so the soul is led to more reflective depths. It is traditionally associated with the remembrance of ancestors, with the coming of death and the conception of new life. In the human growth cycle, Samhain corresponds to the period of old age when wisdom, freedom of spirit, and clarity are experienced. Samhain is a good time to celebrate the lives of our elders, all those whose action ideas have brought resolution and peace, all holy ones whose sacrifice have brought new life and opened spiritual thresholds to all. And the Samhain season goes from November 1st through to January 31st. And this year has been a real dig in for me in the Samhain season. I really have brought the intention forward that this Samhain season is a real important time for me to reconnect with my ancestors, connect in with my DNA, connect in with my lineages, and do healing, moving backwards and forwards in the line, in the genetic energy. And part of that is also finding resolution and peace with this time of year that is a big Western cultural phenomena, really, of consumerism rather than connecting with our ancestors. When people get together for Thanksgiving, a lot of times it's not getting together for the purpose of connecting with their ancestors. It's about sitting around and eating a big meal, getting fat, watching a football game, and then buying a whole bunch of stuff when the sales come on. I really have a fundamental problem with that, because that perpetuates our taking advantage of the world around us and not giving proper thanks to where our food comes from and our connections to each other and community. And buying a whole bunch of stuff, does that really fill the hole that you're looking to fill? Or is it connection that you really need? And this year, I am supremely happy that my family's not doing a big dinner. We're going to sit and spend time with one another. The guys are out doing an exercise. They're doing a 5K with community, with their exercise community. We're not doing a Western traditional Thanksgiving, and I am so happy about that, because it's taken time to slowly break away from those, I think, habits that don't serve us and those expectations that don't serve us. The guys are going to get their exercise, they're going to get their friends, rubbing elbows with their friends, but then come home and just spend time with each other. And I think that Thanksgiving also perpetuates this really unhealthy relationship with food, because the expectation to eat high sugar foods and fill yourself up, empty your plate, eat and gorge too much. It's very much of a remembrance of it harkens back to overconsumption, gluttony, which I think does us a disservice in our culture, where we have a lot of people who are struggling with obesity and struggling with diabetes, and they have a hard time during this time of the season because they indulge because it's societally expected, and then they get sick, and then they have fallout months later. And it's a cycle that I really wish we could think before we did things. And just because everybody does it doesn't mean it's healthy. Which also brought me to, this is the card I drew today. Releasing allegiances. Is that not the perfect card for today? Releasing allegiances. This is from the Sacred Rebels Oracle card, also by Alana Fairchild. I'm slowly moving from, I thought this was a perfect day to do it, from the Earth Warriors to the Sacred Rebels. So we probably have about 10 cards left in the other deck, so I'll be pulling whenever I feel like it. So the Releasing Allegiances says, it's time to hold on to yourself and let go of another. You have gained all that is meant to be from that connection. You've given what you have, and you have received. The need to let go does not deny the value of what's been acquired. It is more that the time has come for greater productivity, creativity, abundance, and consciousness. You have earned the right to step out of the frequency you're in, out of the old habits and relationships and possibilities that are limited to an outmoded frequency. It is time to expand into higher frequencies of experience. Take the wisdom of what you've learned into something new. New connections, new relationships, new experiences. A higher turn in the spiral of life. Trust that you can step into solitude for a time without being consumed by loneliness. This is a time of self-love, paying attention to yourself, nurturing, holding, and being honest with yourself. It doesn't mean you can't love someone else or turn your attention outward, but you also need to balance the inward for time and quality of time with yourself. This Oracle card is a confirmation of the work that you are doing on yourself for yourself. Your level of self-love is growing, and your ability to love consciously and healthily is increasing as a result. This was the other one. Backing yourself up and not giving in to the opinions of others, no matter how highly you would have rated their opinion in the past, is important. It is highly likely that you are breaking with tradition, a role model or belief system that you've outgrown. You must be there for yourself because you're doing well, and you're on the right path, and you're growing. I know that Thanksgiving is really important to a lot of people, and I'm not telling people to give up Thanksgiving. I'm not. I'm really, really not. What I'm saying, and what I mean to say, is that I think what has happened with the idea of Thanksgiving and the origins of it is something that we really need to look at. And we need to really, as a culture and as a people and as a community of people, we need to look at reframing this and not reframing it in how it's been reframed. I think traditionally Thanksgiving was maybe not a bad idea. You're getting together with relatives. You're saying thanks for the feast. There have been feast and Thanksgiving holidays back to the beginning of man. You celebrate the end of the harvest season. That's been done in every culture around the world. You do that. You give thanks. But that's not what Thanksgiving is now. Maybe it is individually for some people, but too many people it's not. I've watched it. I've watched it happen in my lifetime. And I'm sure it started before my lifetime. I know that this is not a new thing. This has come out of decades of change. But I really think that as a culture, we need to look at how to shift it back to a more traditional thanks. Giving thanks for the food, giving thanks for our family, connecting with our ancestors, going back to our agrarian roots. Every single culture comes from an agrarian society of some kind. Go all the way back to the beginning. And it not be a capitalistic, things obsessed time of year. I know that that's how a lot of people make their money. And I don't know what the solution is. But I know that this is not sustainable. Not long term. It's going to fall apart. We're going to run out of resources if we're not careful. And if we're not more mindful, and if we're not participating somehow in what that solution is. I don't have the solution, and I know that I don't. But you bring community together, and there's gonna be somebody who has one idea, and another person has another idea, and then you have a new thing that's born. And human beings are ingenious, smart entities. We have an amazing ability for resolution and ideas and new ways of doing things. And new ways of doing things is a wonderful thing as long as we are not destroying the world we're living in and destroying our communities and our families, and when we're not healing. Buying stuff just for the reason to have stuff. Let's back up and be more mindful. I encourage all of you to, instead of buying from Amazon, which I know is an easy click, 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 because I too am guilty of that, find an artist, find a maker on Etsy, Google it. There are hundreds of thousands of artists and creators out there that do commissions, that make these little special things. And if you're artistically or creatively inclined, think of things you can make for your friends and your family. I think it's important. I've always done that. It's very rarely I've ever made gifts or not made gifts for other people. Most of the time I make things. Every once in a while I buy something and I have an extra of something and I pass it on. But most of the time I make stuff. And I've done that for decades. I don't even know really when I turned the corner of realizing that my love language is making and giving and using the energy as I'm an energy sensitive, and I have to transmute that energy or I go a little bit wiggy. So taking all that energy that I have and transmuting that into something else, something beautiful. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it came from my grandma or my mom or my dad. My dad's definitely a maker out of love. He makes food. He makes woodworking things. He's definitely a creator. And I know that not all of my family is, but that's kind of where my thoughts are today for this day, that everybody else is getting together and consuming more food and buying all kinds of things on the internet. I get that. I've been there. I have. Can't throw a stone in a glass house. Well, you can, but I'm not going to. But this year I've really focused on ancestral work, and part of the ancestral work to me bubbled up that I'm really, really thankful today that we are not celebrating a traditional Western culture Thanksgiving. We're doing our own thing, and I'm probably going to embroider and work in my studio and take time to connect to my ancestors. I might do an ancestral ritual today. We're just past the new moon, going into the full moon, and it's the perfect time to bring that ancestral energy forward and share that with others. So I wish you a beautiful day today. Have a blessed morning, a blessed day, and I will see you tomorrow in prayer. Blessed be.